until that somebody brings it to them, or they experience a contrast of, for some blessed reason, they're able to experience a moment of peace, and then realize, oh, I think like when I'm doing XYZ, or when I'm involved in this thing or that thing, they notice that they have anxiety or fear of something.
Hey, welcome to the Overflow Podcast. This is a podcast on a mission to discover how you and I can live a life of abundance, full to overflowing. For Season 4, Philip and I are talking with a mental health therapist to ask questions about anxiety and depression, how we can spot the signs, identify the causes, and fight for an overflowing life. My name is Carl Lindsay, and this is episode 28. Hello everyone. When we were planning for this season and we decided to talk about mental health and cover anxiety and depression, we figured there's more to talk about than one can fit in just one conversation. And so what you're going to get for the rest of this season, we're going to be spending 3 episodes on anxiety, how we can identify it, why we have it, and how we can beat it. And then we'll do the same for depression. So today we're starting part 1 of that mini-series on anxiety, and we're talking with our guest, Jamie Stodola, about how we can identify anxiety. We're really hoping these conversations with Jamie are helpful to you. And so if you're just joining us for the first time this episode, this is actually part 3 in a long conversation my co-host Philip Milosavljevic and I had with Jamie. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Southern California. And so you may find the first 2 conversations helpful too. So make sure you go back and listen, starting with episode 26. Jamie is all about helping her clients grow into their potential. As a therapist, she supports their transformation journey towards healing emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Her goal, like ours is on this podcast, is to help you recover from the lies and misbeliefs that have been keeping you from living an overflowing life, and also to help you discover the peace and joy that is found in Christ when you become the person God has created you to be. So before we dive into this conversation, though, I wanted to share some resources with you. Our church actually recently put together a bunch of resources to help you if you or others you know find themselves on this journey fighting for your mental health. They have a number of articles and 7 different information booklets available for download on topics from how to get help to brain training, all sorts of different things, anxiety, depression, etc. And so you can actually access them through the link in the show notes or visit choosetooverflow.com/NAD. That's N for November, A for Apple, D for Dog. choosetooverflow.com/NAD. Also, if you want to take a mental health assessment, we want to encourage you to be able to make sure you're on top of that. So you can do that at Mental Health America. The link again is in the show notes, or you can go to screening.mhanational.org. If you don't have any close friends or family to talk to and are considering harming yourself, please reach out to your National Suicide Prevention Line. If you're in the United States, the number to call is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or if you're in Australia, the number is 13 11 14. That's 13 11 14. If you're not in those 2 countries, please look up your local phone number or other resources on suicide prevention. Again, we hope this conversation with Jamie is really helpful to you. So here's the conversation Philip and I had with Jamie on how to identify anxiety.
Jamie, thank you so much for joining us again for another episode. This particular episode, we're going to talk about how can you identify anxiety. You know, I was spending some time with a young adult in particular one day, and as we were discussing just the various things that were on his mind, he told me, I suffer with anxiety. And I said, okay, tell me, what do you mean by that? Well, I have to take medication every single day because I can't deal with the pressure of how things are at work. And I was like, oh, really? I mean, what could happen? What happens for you? And he's like, I just get to this point where I just have to like get up and just move because I can't deal with what I'm feeling internally because of the stress load. And I just keep thinking about things, and I get scared about what might happen if I get to that point. So, Jamie, tell us just what is anxiety at the core? What's like this broad picture that we can kind of then understand it more specifically, and maybe even tell us what are the different types of anxieties. Maybe it's not like one of these young adults who's dealing with it. Maybe it's a stay-at-home mom and she's just tired of being at home all day, or an elderly person, or I mean, just what is it? What are the different types of anxiety?
Well, there are 7 different types.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow. I did not think there were that many.
I'll explain them in a moment,
Okay.
however, or share with you what they are. But it really is this state that your was a church member?
Yeah, a young adult.
A young adult was sharing. It's a feeling of dread, anticipating events. It's pacing back and forth. It's an inner turmoil. It's hard to kind of like organize their thoughts and make a decision. Anxiety is a feeling of like uneasiness and worry. Usually they are there are overreactions to situations that perhaps wouldn't be as that people wouldn't overreact to. There are somatic complaints. This has to do with the physical aspect of anxiety.
What was that word?
Somatic.
Somatic.
It's the relationship between the brain and the body.
Okay.
So this person's probably restless, which means that they also are quite easily fatigued. It's hard to concentrate. There's a lot of fear, that they're kind of just fearful of things. So it's just, this is the kind of general idea. And this is probably what I might explain to you first is generalized anxiety disorder, SAD. And the
very sad.
Yes. And so the things that are categorized in terms of how we would, the things that we would inquire about as a therapist would be their ability to concentrate, their level of irritability. They would probably be experiencing edginess and a feeling of being out of control, like you were saying about the young adult. Fatigue, lethargy, tense muscles, up in the back and the shoulders, and trouble focusing on different tasks, and obsessive overthinking about negative things, and anxiety causing thoughts, kind of like disaster thinking. So that's general anxiety. That's one of the 7. The other 6 are social phobias.
Oh, okay.
Panic disorder. So this person will have panic attacks. Agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia. Strangers?
Kind of the space that they're in.
Okay.
So social phobia has more to do with social interaction or people. Agoraphobia has to do with going out and being out. And then there's regular like phobias that you might have heard about, like snakes or airplanes or the randomest of things. There's post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And then lastly, there's obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD.
Wow. Now, when I think of anxiety, I have to tell you, I wasn't even thinking about some of those symptoms that you were addressing. I was like, gosh, I might have anxiety. I feel irritable. I feel like I'm exhausted and fatigued. But now that could also be because we have 2 kids and I'm staying up late at night.
Yes. So you have to take a look at the whole picture.
Yeah. But now, what are some of the signs of anxiety that someone might be going through, for instance, just in everyday life? And how can we even identify it in our own life? How can you kind of take this reflection about a personal life?
Well, it is true. It is possible that there are people who do not realize that they're struggling with anxiety and even are having the somatic symptoms, the physical symptoms of it. Perhaps they're not aware that their heartbeat is kind of like beating a bit faster or something like that, or that their palms get sweaty and it just does not dawn on them. And it's not until perhaps maybe they've talked to somebody else or somebody else has shared, like, when I get anxious or nervous, this is what happens to me. Until that somebody brings it to them, or they experience a contrast of, for some, you know, blessed reason, they're able to experience a moment of peace, and then realize, oh, I think, like, when I'm doing XYZ, or when I'm involved in this thing or that thing, they notice that they have anxiety or fear of something.
It's like an example of that. I know when changing your diet, you all of a sudden realize the things that your previous diet was doing to your body. If you, like, go off cheese or something, you're like, oh, feels so much lighter.
Not as bloated anymore.
Exactly. So that's
Not
the kind
so
of thing.
gassy.
But to the mental health side of things, it's the same kind of thing. You notice when you take a break from your phone for, like we were talking about in the other episode, take a break from your phone for a couple of weeks, you'll really notice the positive side effects that hiatus can have.
Yes. So definitely, I think even more than depressed people. However, I think a lot more people are more aware if they're anxious or not, if they're struggling with anxiety or not, more than somebody with depression. So yes, there are times where people don't realize that they're struggling with some feelings of anxiety, but it's more likely that they do know.
Right. Okay. So what about high functioning anxiety? That wasn't one of the questions, or that wasn't one of the types you mentioned. A listener wrote in the question, what are some signs of high functioning anxiety? Because it doesn't get talked about too much. How is that different?
So high functioning anxiety is not an actual diagnosis. It's kind of perhaps more of a kind of social euphemism. Is that the word?
Euphemism?
Yeah. That's being used to describe what people are experiencing. But the thing that can appear potentially positive about it is that it seems like it propels the person forward to be productive.
Yeah.
But it's actually the fear that's,
okay. So it's a phobia.
them.
It's one of the phobia. They could be struggling from a phobia anxiety.
Maybe, I guess, if you're thinking a fear of not succeeding.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, this is not necessarily a diagnosis. However, what is probably happening for this person is similar to kind of your question, and that is, how can you tell if somebody or yourself is struggling with anxiety? And so this person will probably show up very well and look like things are very well together, but in actuality, they're not. So they might have trouble being like people pleasers. They might have insomnia. They're more prone to abuse substances or use substances to help calm them. And in fact, they're not as easy to potentially get along with. They might be quite productive people, but they're not quite as easy to get along with. They might appear on the outside that they're organized and have it all together, but it's not congruent with what's actually going on in the inside.
Okay, yeah.
I'm wondering also about, just, Jamie, if you could speak into the fact that the difference between anxiety and depression, some of these symptoms almost seemed a little similar to me as I'm hearing you kind of speak about it. I guess, what sets anxiety apart from depression?
Great question, because they are definitely related. They often hold hands. And so if you kind of think of a depression bubble, all of these, by and large, all of these areas that the 7 areas of anxiety, they all overlap into depression at least generally 50% or more of the time. So what that means is there's a comorbidity.
Yeah.
And so there's more than one diagnosis. So it's very common that they would be together.
It's like one of those Venn diagrams where it's mostly overlapping.
Yeah. It's interesting. My wife was telling me the other day, when someone dies, she's a physician, we don't just put one reason why they died. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Well, you can't just say, oh, they died because of a heart attack. No, it was like heart attack, high blood pressure. Da, da, da. They list off like 6 or 7 things. It's like, wait a second, what in the world? But that's because you can't just simply say, oh, it's conclusively this very thing, because they're all related. So that makes sense in what you're talking about, how anxiety and depression have a hand holding, as you would say, picture. That makes sense.
And the same, though, off what you were saying about what your wife was explaining, is that same is true with anxiety and depression, like the causes, the reasons. We're talking kind of in a broad sense here, and maybe we're getting a little specific because you guys have some questions or you're sharing other experiences, but each situation is quite unique as to why they're struggling or what the causes are.
I did deal with kind of going deeper with this one young adult that I was talking about. They were also struggling with their identity. And I think this brought about actually their anxiety in a big way as we kind of talked more and more about it. When did you notice this? Well, when I kind of came out and I was struggling with this, like, what would people think about me? And that was a very challenging season for them. And so I think this really contributed, I should say, in my non-professional therapist, picture, but just how he was describing it. Hey, when I came out like this, and particularly I'm hiding it from my dad, he doesn't know that I feel like that I'm gay. And so that's really also on my mind all the time. I mean, that's a very unique thing for him. Whereas someone else, it's just like, it's a very different story why they're dealing with anxiety. So I like how you said that. It's case by case. Everyone is unique and everyone is different in why and where they are.
Coming from we're talking about the case by case thing, but we have the Bible as a manual for all cases, we would hope. And so how do you see Scripture addressing anxiety, and what can we learn from what it says?
There are definitely many verses that can, give us counsel, as well as people in the Bible, characters,
Yeah.
Stories,
stories.
Yeah.
One that recently jumped out to me was Mary and Martha. This account, or what I'm alluding to about what took place with Mary and Martha at Jesus' feet, is in Luke 10.
Okay.
And Martha was anxious. And it says in the Bible, Jesus actually says to her, you're anxious. You should be doing basically what Mary's doing. And he called her out.
That's good.
I think I might have noted, it says here, Jesus said to her that she was worried and troubled or anxious about many things. And then he consoled her by saying only one thing was needed, and that Mary had chosen it. What did she choose to do? She chose to be at Jesus' feet.
I like that.
Wow. Now, someone who says, hey, I've quote unquote had my devotions. I've prayed. I go to church. I'm still dealing with this.
That's where I would say they probably will benefit from therapy, because a therapist would be able to hone in on what it is that is plaguing them, what it is they're ruminating on, what it is they're worried about, and what's triggering their fears, or what's triggering in general. So, I mean, they would need a professional. They would need somebody to sit down with them and dissect what it is that they're experiencing and get to the core.
I think of so many other scriptures as well, Jamie, the thought where Jesus says, hey, cast all of your cares upon me. I think that's another one where I find myself personally just rushing throughout days where I have issues and problems going on. And I feel as though I can solve it if I just had enough time or potentially enough resources to accomplish whatever it is. But I think that's where another part of potentially anxiety can rush into my life personally is when I take full responsibility on me without saying, God, I guess you're there too. Let's talk about this.
There definitely, you can definitely find throughout the Bible notions or ideas or even words. The words anxiety and depression. In Proverbs 12:25, it says, and different versions use, well, I'll say it first and then I'll tell you where. Anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word, it makes it glad. And I've seen some other versions that say anxiety in the heart of a man causes anxiety. So I don't know if that was like, what versions those are, but nonetheless, it's definitely there. And we've already discussed that there's a very high propensity of depression and then having anxieties. So, it's definitely there in the Bible.
Love that. Thanks for listening in today. If you want to learn more, don't forget there's some free resources available at choosetooverflow.com/NAD. The link is in the show notes. We're going to be continuing this conversation next week, so make sure to subscribe. We don't want you to miss an episode this season. Next week's topic is answering the question of why we are struggling with anxiety. If you'd like to get in touch with Jamie, you can email her at jamie.wellbeing@gmail.com. Or if you're looking for a therapist to work with, she offers remote sessions, so you can see the link in the show notes. If you've got any questions or comments for us, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at choosetooverflow, or send us an email the old-fashioned way at hello@choosetooverflow.com. And don't forget, we also have reflection guides on the website for each episode to help you share what you learned from today's conversation with others. That's choosetooverflow.com. Thanks again for listening. We hope you choose to overflow this week. Let's chat again soon.